So Josh, can you hear me okay?
Yep. So it's just about 10 o'clock. And I think I'm looking at the list of everyone who's joined us so far. I think I know everybody, but for those of you who I haven't met yet, I'm Josh Rogers. I'm President and CEO of NewTown. This is brand new to us. It's an experiment, so I hope you'll be patient, but I hope we'll be able to provide you with some information that'll be useful and let you get some of your questions answered. So the first thing I want to say is how much I respect all of you. This is a completely unprecedented time. None of us were prepared for this. And the fact that virtually all of you came together and voluntarily went ahead to close is just incredible. It's really awe-inspiring. It reminds me how much I enjoy being downtown with all of you, and how you've built this incredible place that doesn't exist anywhere else on earth. And a lot of it is because each of you individually are such special people. You know, the big thing about this crisis is a lot of you who own these businesses are not in the demographic that is most threatened. And so you had to do something at enormous personal cost that was to protect someone other than yourself. And I just want to tell you how much I appreciate you doing that. So we're very, very, very lucky to have this group of people running our downtown businesses. And I know it's going to, we're going to get through this together. So right now, I think my priorities moving forward are, number one, to make sure that that all of us and all the people who work for us have a safe place to sleep, have adequate shelter, and have adequate food to eat to get through this crisis. My next priority is to make sure that everyone who is now closed opens again. I do not want to lose one single business coming out the other side of this thing. We will reopen. Downtown will come back to life, and I want all of you right there with us. So just to go over some basics for those of you who are new to Zoom, if you use your mouse and scroll to the bottom of the chat window, you've got several options down there. One of them is the chat window. If you'll go ahead and pull up that chat window, that's how we're going to handle the question and answers. And we're also going to share some links to helpful information for you as we go through this webinar. So go ahead and pull that chat window up. In the very bottom of the chat window, you type your message, and there's a to-line. You can do to everyone, or you can privately chat specific people that are on the phone call with us. If you will just leave it to everyone when you post your Q&A. You can post the questions throughout the talk, so as things occur to you, I'll be keeping track of that as we go. Any of the questions that we don't read aloud and let our experts weigh in on, we will try and follow up with answers afterwards in our resource guide, and Emily's going to post a link to that resource guide also in that chat window. So keep an eye on that chat window for links to helpful information, and then just keep your questions coming in that chat window, and we'll answer them when we get to them. We're going to end at 11 today. So, you know, I am sure we will not get to everything that everybody's worried about before 11, but we'll get through as much as we can. And like I said, we'll follow up with additional answers after that. We're also recording, so we'll be able to post a recording of this video session afterwards on our website and on the resource guide. So I've got a couple of people who are going to help today. Our agenda basically is going to start with Emily. I'm incredibly grateful to Emily Hopkins. She's our director of place. She's really been lead on NewTown's response to this crisis. She's been sending daily emails to all of you, and then also taking all your questions and helping get them disseminated through our office to whoever's best to answer them, and then get that information back to you. The resource guide that she's assembled on the website with Bethany's help is really top-notch, and it's constantly updated. So if you miss the emails, you can go to the resource guide at any time and find the latest information. We're still learning alongside you. We've also got James Fritze. James is CFO at NewTown Macon. He's also a certified public accountant and has a lot of experience previously running hospital systems and also running his own small businesses. So he's a wealth of resources. We've also got Robby Mathis from the Robby Group. The Robby Group's currently under contract with NewTown to create a business finance academy that we actually had started before the crisis set in, and we'll be finishing virtually as we go through this crisis. So Robby's here with us too. So we've got some significant expertise in tax and accounting to help answer some of your financial questions. So how we're going to do this is I'm going to turn it over to Emily first for a few minutes just to tell you about the resource guide and summarize NewTown's daily emails and what we're doing on an ongoing basis to support you. I'm then going to turn it over to James to talk a little bit specifically about applying for unemployment. We've got some files that we can share that can help you prepare for that, even if you're not able to get onto the website. And then I'm going to turn it over to Robby just for some of his tips and pointers that he's going through with some of his small business clients right now. And then I'll moderate your questions and answers again using the chat panel in the software. So Emily, I will turn it over to you now, and I will mute myself. So take it away.
All right. Awesome. Thanks so much, Josh. And I just want to echo everything that Josh said. We are all here. We're rooting for every single one of you, and we are here to help you as much as we possibly can. We know that this is incredibly tough, but want you to know that we are here to support you, and that is what we are here to do. So please don't ever hesitate to ask or reach out to us because we are here for y'all. So just wanted to go over a few of the resources and some of our communication that we have going on. Like Josh said, I'm Emily. If you are on our email list, I'm the one who's been emailing you if I haven't had the pleasure to meet you yet. So we are sending out daily emails to our list of business owners, our downtown Macon business owners. And in these emails, we are trying to give you updates day by day of all the new resources that are coming out, of all the new information that we're receiving so that you can get that as quickly as possible. So we've included things like financial resources, like information about the SBA loans, information about partial claims, unemployment. We're also including promotional opportunities, like today is the Great American Takeout, so we're trying to promote our restaurants and doing those sorts of things. So if you aren't a part of those emails and you'd like to be, you can email me. And my email address is Emily, EMILY, @newtownmacon.com. And I just posted in the chat a recap of what I'm going to talk about. So my email address is there, the link to the resource guide as well. Related to promotional opportunities, if you're part of our emails, you've seen that we're working on a virtual cherry blossom experience. We are partnering with Visit Macon and the Cherry Blossom Festival to do this. And this is a way for us to uplift our community and still celebrate cherry blossom because the trees are blooming regardless. And we still have a beautiful spring in downtown Macon and Macon as a whole. And we know that many of you months ago started purchasing merchandise for cherry blossom. So we want to help you move that merchandise. And even you restaurants who may have ingredients for cherry blossom specials. If you have anything like that, please let me know. We will be promoting that for the dates of the festival would have been held, so March 27th through April 5th. If you could get that information to me as soon as possible, would love to include you in all of those promotions, but definitely by this Thursday at the very latest. As Josh mentioned, we have a resource guide that Bethany Rogers created that has some really incredible tips. It has really digestible presentation of all the resources that I'm sure you're seeing constantly being updated in your Facebook feed or you're getting emails about. So this is a really quick and dirty guide to the ways to get through COVID-19. So we have things like summaries of the SBA loans, partial claims, unemployment, those types of things. We also have some fun stuff like a Spotify playlist that you can add your own songs to help you get through the days, and some links of different trainings and webinars you can do. And we are updating that daily and sending that link out in our emails daily. You can also go to our website, newtownmacon.com/COVID-19, and there's a link to that resource guide there as well. We also have a Facebook group for downtown business owners. That is where we are posting all of this stuff. I post our daily emails there, as well as other quick information. That's where we are getting a lot of comments and questions from all of you. So if you aren't in that Facebook group, let me know. I will friend you and add you to that Facebook group so you can get that quick minute-by-minute information updates that you need. And finally, just wanted to plug another training opportunity that we have coming up. the great thing about this time that we find ourselves in, or I guess a positive thing, is that we live in a digital world. So there's still a lot of opportunities to support our downtown businesses and our small businesses throughout the community. So one of those, of course, is getting your stuff up online and building out online stores. So we've partnered with Erica Conley, who's a local social media consultant, and Erica Neubauer, who is a local web designer, to create a webinar about building out an online store. So they are going to go over things like, how do you write a good product description? How do you take a great photo that will sell your product? What are the best platforms to use? And then how to actually build that step by step. We will be doing that webinar this Thursday, March 26th at 11 a.m. We will send that link out in our emails and in our Facebook group. And again, in the chat section, we have a link to the resource guide and my email address, so you can get plugged into all of these resources that we're trying to get to you daily. And with that, we'll hand it over to James.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Emily. James, if you don't mind taking it away and talking a little bit about the unemployment process, and I will post a link in the chat while you're talking to all the files you shared with us with email yesterday. So if you want to reference any of those, people have the ability to download and look at those while you're talking.
All right, thanks, Josh. Can everybody hear me okay? All right, so we're going to talk about what's called an employer-filed partial claim for unemployment, or as we all usually call it, SUTA. So before we jump into the details, let me give everybody just a second of history, just so I can get everybody to the same place. So SUTA, or unemployment, is an employer-paid program that you do a quarterly return and a payment. And so you've been paying into this fund year after year, quarter after quarter. And so typically what happens is an employee separates from the employer, then the employee goes to the office, the labor office, and files the claim. And then you get into this confrontation as to whether the employer wants the employee to get this benefit or not. And so what this employer file partial claim has done is it taken all that process out and allowed the employer to step up and basically file this claim for all of their employees. And so the thing that we need to remember is the max benefit is $365 a week, and that is taxable wages. And so if the employer elects to have taxes withheld, $365 will turn into about $275 or so real quick. So it's not a big benefit, but there is some benefit. The benefit to doing this employer filed is that the employee doesn't have to do anything unless they want a direct deposit, and then there's some links on how they set up direct deposit. But basically the employer is filing for the employee, and once you get a successful filing, the employees will get paid within 48 hours. So for example, if you have a work week that ends on Sunday, you can't file before the end of the work week. But if you have a work week that ends on Sunday, you on Monday could file. And then once you successfully file, they would be paid in 48 hours. So typically they could get paid Thursday or Friday of that next week, which is kind of within, I think, most people's payroll cycles if they pay on a weekly basis. So they're trying to kind of accelerate it, because if you file the old way, it can take up to 4 to 6 weeks, depending on to get your first check. So, all right, we've put 5 documents out there. We've pulled them off the Georgia website. There's an administrator guide that hopefully everybody has kind of muddled through at this point and gotten an employer portal log on, because you've got to have that log on to have access to your account. And so whoever's been filing your unemployment return probably has that. Like, for example, Altera does NewTown's payroll, and so I got them to add me as an administrator to our portal. And then we also did the COVID-19 employer filed claims instructions, and then we did employer filed claim desk aid, and then we did the partial claim file upload instructions, and then there is what they call a PCU template, which is the Excel template. The thing that we have to remember when we go through this process is the system does not store any of the data week to week to week. So you've got to go in every week, and if you've got 10 employees, and upload 10 employees, or if you got 50 employees, you got to upload all of them. And so they've come up with this Excel upload template to basically help you through that, because you could basically just rename it every week and upload it. So the steps is that you go to the portal. Yeah, there's Josh just shared a stat, and it's kind of overwhelming from just looking at the spreadsheet. But if you look at the upload instructions, it's very specific, because Scott had a question about why he can't get the social security number, and we got the $7,300 question that we've been talking about. So I'll get to those in just a second. But you've got to have to do this. You've got to have your employers' names. You got to have their social security number. You got to have their address, their birth date, and then you've got to ask your employees whether they want to have state and federal taxes withheld, and then you've got to have some sort of earnings report. And so once you have all those, you just log into the portal, and then you select your employer account, and then you do file employer filed claims, and then you select the method of whether you want to enter it or upload it. And once you do that, there's a whole bunch of just follow the prompts from there. So it's actually pretty simple. Like I said, you've got to upload it every week, because it's not going to save any of that information. So Josh, if you could pull up the partial claim file upload instructions for everybody. Does that ring a bell? All right, so as you can see, it says required information and then how to file. Then if you'll go down to the next page, Josh, what I want to point out is right there where it says advise your employees, that's what you tell your employees so that they can go in and get their direct deposit set up, so they're not having to wait on a check. So in the employer filed instructions is where the piece is. All right, does that make sense? All right, now if you could, Josh, if you could pull up the partial claims file upload instructions. No, it's the, can I share my screen, Josh? Will that work?
Yeah, James, you should be able to share your screen now. Same place at the bottom of the screen where you've got those options for the chat window. There should be a green button now that says share screen. And then it'll pull up all the windows that are open on your desktop right now, and you just select the one you want.
Okay. This thing is kind of ugly, but I think it'll help you. Is that if you look at the spreadsheet, these are the columns for each of the spreadsheets. So in column A of that spreadsheet, you have to put social security number. And then if you go over to where the description is, it'll take it with dashes or without dashes. Does that make sense? The weekend date has got to be in month / day / year, and that needs to be your week ending date. And that will need to be consistent every week. So if you say my weekend Sunday, then that needs to be Sunday after Sunday after Sunday. The social security number is really important, because that's how they go into the match that you have reported this person's wages week after week after week. So this to me helps you, because like if you try to go in and put a first last name that's larger than the maximum size, which is 30 characters, it'll probably reject it. So there's a little bit of art in trying to make sure that you're matching the science. Like street mailing address can only be 25 characters. The mailing city can only be 12. State's got to be 2. The zip's 5. The county of residence can be up to 35. Phone number can be up to 14. You got to have a date of birth in there, gender, race, and then if you just keep going down, we'll get to this thing that's confusing everybody, which is this earned less than $7,300. All right, I reached out to Crystal Hamilton, who is the field agent for NewTown. If you look when you log in, over on the left of this portal, you'll see who your field agent is, and it gives them your their email address. So I would encourage you to email them if you have any questions, because I was basically confused on the 7,300. Basically, the 7,300 is for the entire period that they've worked for you. It's not a quarter. It can be multiple years. And so if somebody's been with you long enough to make over $7,300, then you put, did employee earn at least $7,300 in your employee? Yes, right? And then the next question I had for her, which he hasn't answered, which is the next field's only 4 digits. So if somebody's worked for you for 5 years, I would hope they've made more than 4 digits worth of salary. I would put in all 9s. If somebody has worked has earned more than 7,300 and they've earned more than $999, I would put $999. I think what they're trying to figure out in there is if you have employees who have not really worked more than a quarter or 2, they're trying to figure out what their earnings are. And they really don't know that, because by the time you file, you're always filing, at least a quarter plus a month in arrears. So they may not have the most current information on your employees. So they're trying to figure out whether you have any new employees, because I want to make sure they're able to give those folks the max benefit. And $7,300, it's not magic. It's if you take the 365 benefit and then you mark it up 1.5 times, because that's what the earnings have to be to get the 365, and you multiply it by a quarter or 13 weeks, you get close to $7,300. So they're trying to figure out how to get people the max benefit. All right, then if you go down into that weekly gross column, that will be if you have folks that are still working for you, but they're not getting their full week's worth. So if you've got somebody who used to work and I'm making this up, $500, and now they're only working a few hours, so they only made $50 that week, you would just go in there and put the $50 in there, because then they'll go in and they'll just offset what they've earned against the benefit. Then you've got a whole bunch of optional fields, so you just leave those blank, assuming they don't have other names. But the one important one to make sure you don't forget to do is the very last one, that one, COVID-19 out of work. Make sure you get that as a yes. And if it says it's required, it's got to have something in it. So even if all those yeses need to be no's, please put those in so that file will update properly. The good news is once you go through this once and you get it to upload, all you would really need to do each week would be to change that gross earnings amount. So certainly here to try to help if we can. This is a brand new process. I never even heard of this, to be honest with you, before. I didn't know you could actually do this, but I guess it makes sense if you have a partial shutdown. I guess for some seasonal businesses, this would make sense. So, Josh, that's kind of the nuts and bolts of it.
That's great. I think you already hit some of the questions in the chat window too. So if you'll take, let's see, if you'll take the screen sharing off, we'll switch over to Robby. And
do I just click new share, or I do stop?
Yep, there you go. You got it. Thank y'all for your patience. We're all trying to figure this out as we go. Perfect. Great work.
All right.
And I will, Robby, if you want to test out and see if your audio is working now, it should be.
Good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. So I'd love to hear from you about some of the things you've been working through with your clients right now, or any tips and tricks you've got that may be helpful before we go into the Q&A.
Well, it's certainly what we're going through is uncertain, like James spoke to. Some of this is completely new. We see more often the partial unemployment filings with larger companies where you have a change in labor force. So we have an immediate change, and this is a response that can actually protect your employees here. What I'm seeing with clients right now and talking to business owners, biggest things are tax matters, staying open where their cash is at, questions on resources or relief from maybe their lenders or getting additional loan resources through the federal government. So these could be options, but they're things to carefully consider. Those are a lot of the things I'm seeing right now. This filing is critical because you can really help out your employees at this time where there's not a lot else you can do. You're going forward here, but you can do this, and it's a tool that's deployed immediately.
Great, thanks. So you've covered some of the questions. Robby, I've got you and James. Your audio's turned on right now. So one of the questions I got earlier was from a business owner who was wondering, should they hold out to file for the SBA disaster loan to help cover payroll, since it seems like that will be available to cover payroll and it will be forgivable? Or should they go ahead and file unemployment so that those, because we have an uncertain timeline around the SBA disaster loans? And I thought that was a really good question. I'm interested in what y'all think the right answer is.
You certainly want to look at it case by case because it needs to be right for you and your company. It's not right for taking on a huge amount of additional debt. What it's right for is staying open, and it can be a very safe form of debt if you're thinking about it really carefully and talking to people that you trust, like NewTown is available, or you have advisors where you're weighing that and carefully considering it. It's not that kind of disaster relief, or the loan in this case from SBA, is not being afforded for expansion. That's really clear. It is being afforded for prior debt, so something that is already existing, so that you can stay open. It has to be in response to COVID-19, no other reason. And it will serve to pay payroll in the meantime. There are provisions in the bill where if you keep that employee throughout this entire period right now, going to about July, if you keep it during that entire period, there's provisions that it can be forgiven. That's not done yet. So that's not something you really want to count on. We like as much certainty as possible. So this isn't a time where you'd really weigh the forgiveness side against also taking care of your employees. So as a business owner, you're looking at it from your ethical responsibility to your employees, as well as the company yourself, and all of those you've done business with. So if you've taken out loans or other things, you're still a business leader and you're in this community and you're acting for it. Those are the things you're weighing right now. I would not look for forgiveness as a reason not to file unemployment, more so that there's critical business need and it's actually the loan.
Gotcha. So the distinction you're drawing there is if you are going to stay open anyway, or you have to stay open anyway, then the SBA disaster loan is your best choice. But if you're looking to get resources to your employees or former employees as quickly as possible, unemployment's really your best and only option in the short term.
That's exactly where I'm at. And again, no expansion. It's for continuity of business, keeping it going just the way it was.
Great. So James, you touched on this earlier, but how do employees get the benefits once the employer has filed the partial unemployment claim?
Yeah, before I answer that, Whitney apparently has already gone through this process, because she was saying in that field where I was suggesting everybody put the 999, she thinks she is saying, no, I was wrong, that you need to leave it blank, and it will then the file upload fine with a blank. So y'all follow Whitney. Don't take my advice. I haven't done it yet. So I was trying to figure out that's the same question. Anyway, yeah, in one of those documents we put out, there is the process. Well, first of all, if the employee does nothing, they will get a check. however long it takes for the check. They say they're going to distribute that money in 48 hours from when it's filed. So however long it takes the state to write a check, drop it in the mail, and you get it. There is an opportunity of doing direct deposit, or they will also set you up on a little MasterCard debit thing. But you've got to go into the portal. The employees have to go into the portal to get set up to do anything other than the default paper check.
Great. I think James referenced the PDF earlier with those instructions for your employees that you can copy and paste and shoot to them directly. And we've already excerpted that and put it onto the resource guide. So that resource guide that Emily shot earlier, you can also find those instructions to share with your employees to get them through that process so they can sign up for direct deposit. Now, Scott Mitchell asked a question earlier. He said he can't get past the Social Security number on the employee filed claim report on the Department of Labor website and has tried for hours. And I know, James, you said you were having a similar problem. Is the Excel sheet a reasonable workaround for that, where you can go ahead and have everything filled out in Excel and ready to upload so that you're not having to have the website process each field while you're logged in?
That would be my guess. My guess is that it's trying to validate as you're tabbing through that. And I sat there for an hour trying to download a document at one point. So my guess is it just doesn't have enough resources in there. But when you do a batch upload like Excel, I think it can sit there and wait until it has resources to update it. So that's my recommendation. Plus the fact that it doesn't keep it from week to week where you have to enter everything again. It seems like the Excel would be better.
Yeah, I think that's a really good tip, because otherwise you're going to be dependent on the website to do it again next week, and you have to re-enter everything from scratch. So that Excel sheet's a great thing to go ahead and do and save. Now, Scott also mentioned in the chat that he switched browsers to the Chrome browser, and that helped solve his problem. So if people are having browser issues with the Department of Labor website, that's another great idea. Try Chrome. Or try switching your browser to be able to see if you can get it work. Also try a time when most people are not going to be doing it. So set an alarm in the middle of the night and get onto the website when traffic's going to be a little bit slower. So I think we've caught up on the questions on the chat. James or Robby, did you see anything that I've missed so far?
There's a question regarding prioritizing bill payments.
Yeah.
Specifically related to sales tax as one of those options. So as a business, you might have seen as a consumer, you're afforded some leeway with, say, your utility providers, or they've already come out and they said, yes, we're going to work with you regardless of the circumstance. That's happening in individual cases. That is not automatic for business. You actually need to reach out and communicate with each of your vendors, whether they're creditors, utility companies. In any of that capacity, communication is absolutely critical right now. The other big component is there is no relief on sales tax. The biggest thing and best way I think of sales tax is you go into the store downtown and you purchase a product for, say, $100, okay? We're familiar with sales tax, 7%. So that $7 belongs, at that point, it comes from the consumer because you're still getting your $100. That money never belongs to you, but the state government is trusting you with that money for a grace period. It must be paid in. You can't hesitate there, certainly not intentionally. Failure to file intentionally is very different from making a mistake and having a penalty you're hoping will get evaded, and it might not. Sales tax is one of those areas where you really don't budge on, but communicate with your vendors.
So, I mean, I think the takeaway right there is, as you look at, if you've got more bills than you've got resources, which almost everyone is in that situation right now, communication is really key with all those vendors. And if you open those communications, you may have a lot more information about consequences to be able to weigh the decision about which vendors to pay or not. I think there's no question right now, especially for some of our people who are waiting for these unemployment claims to come through, that I've heard from several of our businesses who are prioritizing access to food. So they're making sure that their former employees still have access to food until unemployment benefits come through. And I think that's, I think that's an easy thing to prioritize. Does anybody have anything they want to add on those priorities? I think Robby's information about sales tax is very helpful in looking at how you're going to prioritize who to pay and who not to. All right, I think we've caught up on all the questions. If anybody's got any last ones, please pop them into the chat, and we'll get this team of experts to jump on them and provide you with some help and information. I think that covers most of the stuff that I've been asked offline and over the past couple of days as well. This has been really, really useful information. And like I said, we'll update the resource guide that Emily linked earlier with all this information. And we'll keep updating it. So if there's anything new comes out, we'll get back with these experts and get you updated information. So Annette just asked a question: what if an employer refuses to file a partial claim for their employees? James and I were chatting about that this morning. James, do you want to jump in and talk about what if the employer does not preemptively go ahead and initiate this process?
Well, the employee has the right to go to the Department of Labor and file an unemployment claim. And so that typically is the way the process would go. It's just going to take that employee a longer time to get a benefit. So, yeah, if the employer doesn't take this, the employees have to go to the office and file a claim.
You were telling me earlier it becomes adversarial at that point. You're putting the Department of Labor in the position of having to adjudicate the difference of opinion between the employer and the employee, which could take weeks. And the Department of Labor doesn't have the human resources right now to be able to investigate those very quickly. So it's a big deal for the employer to take the initiative, even though this is a huge hassle, and go ahead and get the process started with the Department of Labor. You were also telling me earlier that the employer can unemploy themselves. Is that right?
If you've been paid through a W-2, so you've actually been reported as an employee through the unemployment, then yeah, you look like, to the unemployment folks, you look like every other employee. So.
And I just got another question from Scott. He asked about the $7,300 again, and the answer to that is leave it blank. If the employee has earned over $7,300, you select yes, and then you leave the next field about their total earnings blank. Is that right?
Yep, that's what Whitney said worked for her. So.
Okay, here's a question from Ryan, and I don't know if either of y'all will be able to answer this, James or Robby, but do you know if an employee must have worked for the company for a certain amount of time to be eligible for unemployment, or earned a certain amount of money to be eligible? Either of y'all jump in and provide.
Robby, I don't think there's any time frame or any amount of money. I think what they'll do is they'll go in and try to calculate the wage base, and the benefits will be based on that. I think that's the whole point for this $7,300 question that we've all been confused about. Is I think they're trying to figure out if you had an employee who hasn't worked but 3 months or so or less, how do we figure out what their benefits are? And so I think that's what this $7,300 question is trying to get to.
They are looking at maximum benefits in the period. Unemployment insurance does have a crossover to even prior employers. Those records they have, obviously. So this is part of it. And that's where the time frame does come in, because it's not for someone that just started today and doesn't have any work history. It's an insurance program.
Yeah, that's a good point. They'll look to all previous employers within a certain date range, and I'm not sure what that is, Robby, how far back they go.
I don't recall with certainty.
So I got a question from Bethany. I'm sure she's gotten this from one of our clients or associates, but do you have any advice for a business that just opened? So somebody who is opening in the crisis or had opened weeks prior, do you have any advice that could be helpful to them at this point?
That's a really challenging spot. It's hard enough when you're opening a business in ordinary time. you're setting out and doing one of the hardest things you could ever do in your life. And this is a scary and stressful time. The hard part is that most of the resources out there, they're going to want to look at business history. There could be loans available, and it's typically going to be in the way of a loan for your business. But again, it's a case-by-case thing. The idea behind it is not in this period to overload yourself with debt so that there's no business to run in the end. The idea is to only do something that's going to benefit you, keep it going, and get you through this period, a period that's really unknown to us at this time. So you have a lot of projections to make. It's one of those where you've got to think about it really carefully. Unfortunately, I don't have real good advice for a brand new business because it's already that tough. It would go back to communication. Work with anyone you can work with and see what you can open up. We're in the community together here, and we're going to try to get through this together. So people will want to work with you if you reach out. It's tough, but try.
Yeah, so I mean, I think that's really helpful advice. Is you got to triage. If you can open a conversation with the people to whom you owe money or will owe money soon, you can get a much better sense about what their expectations and flexibility is, so that you can make a better informed decision about how to manage your resources going forward. I think that's really important. Just catching up on the chat a little bit, Ryan suggested, yeah, so is it an employer really needs to go ahead and preemptively file with the Department of Labor? And I think definitively, yes, absolutely the employer needs to, because I mean, what we're looking at right now is getting resources to people who live week to week. And the only fast way to do that is for the employer to file directly with the Department of Labor. Otherwise, the timeline is who knows. I got a private message from someone else that asked about reports that a bill working through Congress was going to require employers to pay employees two-thirds of their salary after 2 weeks because of COVID-19. My understanding is I don't believe that was in any of the bills that actually passed, and that's still under negotiation in the third relief bill. Does anybody have different information than that?
There was that change to the FMLA.
Yeah.
And so I think that's only applies to if somebody misses work because
of an actual illness.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. That's right.
Separate issue between a layoff and somebody who's working to get sick.
Yeah, thanks, James. So that was actually in the second bill that passed. It's an enhancement to the Family and Medical Leave Act. So that requirement to pay your employee is only if the employee themselves actually come down with a diagnosed case of COVID-19. So it was a much narrower application than anything we're talking about right now. Yes, and Ryan asked again about the $7,300. He asked if that is a lifetime earnings amount, and yes, it is. So if they have worked for you for any amount of collective time and have earned $7,300 from you, then you click yes in that box. It's a lifetime earnings amount, not any time limitation whatsoever. Yeah, and Julie said, right, with the Family Medical Leave Act, that's also if you are required to take home because you were taking care of someone who has been diagnosed with COVID-19. I've actually got some information about the FMLA changes that I can share with Emily and get on the resource guide as well. It's a pretty narrow application. And yeah, I got a question from Marie about the files that James shared earlier for the Department of Labor. I will absolutely grab that link and post it back in the chat again. And again, the most helpful thing is to click and save that link to the resource guide that Emily's posted, because the rest of these links will be in there along with everything else, and it'll be updated live. So, you know, we're expecting a new bill to come out of Congress, God willing, today, tomorrow, sometime really, really soon. And so we're going to have a lot of new information to share based on what's in that bill. And it's entirely speculation at this point. Who knows what's going to be in there? But that Google Doc that Emily's sharing the link to, it will be updated. It will be accurate. So that's the best thing to say. So Scott also mentioned that he has done his unemployment filing. That is congratulations and thank you. That's fantastic. And that he's also opened discussions with all his vendors and creditors. And everyone, he says every one of them has deferred payments. So that's great. I mean, that goes back to what Robby said earlier, is just opening communication could be enough. Instead of sitting home and worrying, you actually open communication with these things and get a deferral out the gate voluntarily. That would be a huge relief for many of you. So just going back to opening conversation, it's definitely worth it to call, because if somebody's going to volunteer that, that's one less thing you've got to worry about right now. So do either of y'all have anything else you want to share? We've caught up on the questions. I don't think I saw anything else come up. I posted the link to the Department of Labor files again. We'll update the resource guide coming out of this with everything that came in. Whitney's asking a question to Scott if he called Department of Labor about sales tax in particularly. James, how much trouble did you have getting in touch with the Department of Labor? You said you spoke with a representative.
I just sent them an email that we
Okay.
had made. Yeah, the sales tax at Department of Revenue, unfortunately. Yeah, my recommendation, I mean, Robby's right. The problem you have is these what I call trust funds. Sales tax is a trust fund, and when you withhold, monies out of your employees' checks, those are kind of trust fund things. Those the taxing authorities get really, really ticky about, because you're holding somebody else's money. But I would go ahead and file these returns. If you can't pay them, I think it's far worse not to file the return. I would just file the return and put a note on it that you can't pay it. And then at least stay compliant. There's a whole nother set of penalties for failure to file. So, my recommendation is if you keep filing them.
Robby, you think the same?
You absolutely keep filing. You want to pay what you can. This is where you might really want to consider representation, because if you're absolutely unable to pay, then you do have a tax liability on your hands, a very serious one that you have to work through. Just like James said, it is a trust account. You're holding someone else's money. The government takes that very seriously. It never belonged to you. It goes from consumer, and it's being trusted to go to the government with you. So at a minimum, even if you choose not to have someone represent you, reach out to the taxing authority and have a dialogue. Again, communication, because there can be installment agreements if you can't pay everything or anything. There are special circumstances where they will look at it very carefully. Doing nothing is the worst thing you can do with sales or employment tax, any of those accounts.
So, layperson's distillation right here. But hearing what both of y'all are saying, when you are looking at the things that you need to pay with very limited resources, if you have any ability to do so at all, the things you need to pay are the things that wasn't your money to begin with anyway. So that's your sales tax and that's your employment tax. Now, if it's financially impossible for you to pay either of those payments, then you need to go ahead and file and let them know that you were unable to pay. And at that point, you really need to think about obtaining professional representation from a CPA or a tax attorney to help work it out, because eventually that will have to be worked out. It sounds like some of these voluntary deferments from other lenders, creditors, utility accounts, those kinds of things, there's a lot more flexibility in that realm than there is around these tax issues of money that really has always belonged to the government and must be remitted quickly. Is that a good summary?
Excellent.
I think we've all caught up, so we're a little bit ahead of time. Like I said, we're going to save this recording, and this may be something I'd love to hear back from y'all. If you are in touch with us, send me an email, send Emily an email if this was helpful to you, or if there are other topics or experts that you'd like us to get together to be able to do this again. We'd love to do it. All of us are still working. We're working one or two at a time to try and keep social distance from each other and try and keep everyone safe from spreading this. But we're in it with you. Again, I just want to say how much downtown is just an incredible place. From when I first got here in 2001 to now, it's come to life, and it's come to life because all of you have dug down to your last penny to open these businesses and to do something special. What you've opened doesn't exist anywhere else on earth. Every one of you is a totally unique business and unique experience to downtown Macon. Walking around the last First Friday was one of the proudest moments of my life, getting to see all of y'all making this happen for us. And we will be right back at it, and we will be right along your side until we get there. So let's just keep working together. Please let me know anything me and my staff can do to help you. Robby, thank you so much for giving us some of your time this morning and expertise. And my team, thank y'all very much from all the locations you're in for getting on and offering your support. And again, Emily, I really appreciate you heading this up for us. And we'll continue to be here to help in any way we can. Thank y'all. I hope you have a great rest of the day.